Alright, here we go, third take. Real quick, Ali.
Okay, I think I probably need to explain how I got to the point where I'm putting a keyboard in the dishwasher. So this whole adventure that we're about to go on starts with a tweet I saw a few years ago about hospital-grade cables posted on a design/aesthetic type of account. It's pretty obvious why they would end up there. They have that 2000s ethereal look to them, like they're from a bubbly future but slightly dated at the same time, especially with that transparent blue plastic. Because I'm me, I remembered that post for a while and eventually woke up one day and decided it's time to look into the hospital-grade power cords. Now, I assumed that this would be the kind of thing that would either be prohibitively expensive or just outright impossible to acquire as a civilian and not a bulk buyer like, a hospital. To my surprise, I was dead wrong. There are tons of companies producing these, from serious-sounding brands I've never heard of to more normal names like Monoprice. You can get them everywhere, including Amazon, and they're really not even all that expensive. Now, power cable is a little vague, so let's get specific about what we're dealing with here. This is a NEMA 515P to IEC 320C13 cable. What does that mean? Well, some of you probably already know the first one, but NEMA is the National Electrical Manufacturers Association, an organization which has been developing electrical standards in the US for nearly 100 years. Among those standards is the ubiquitous 515 plug, which you likely use every day if you live in the US. This is just the 2-pole with a ground that goes into a standard wall outlet. IEC is another similar standards-defining organization, but on the other side of the pond, they're Swiss. The C13 is what goes into the power supply of a device, and you're probably already aware of many that use this, even if you don't recognize the name. Stuff like monitors, desktop PCs, and the PlayStation 4 Pro. Like, specifically for some reason the PS4 Pro, and not the normal PS4 or the PS3 or even the PS5. All those use the double barrel, which is actually an IEC C7. I'm not sure why PS4 Pro switched to the C13, someone should look into it, it's probably interesting. Anyways, the 515 to C13 is a super versatile cable. You probably have 5 of them in operation in your home right now, and an extra 5 in a box somewhere. It's not a cable that the average person would think needs improving, but these hospital-grade variants do bring some genuine utility to the table, even if you're not in a hospital. Visually, they do look nice, obviously, that's what started this. The frosted blue and gray is really cool, that's the one to go for if you want to have something that looks like it was pilfered from a hospital. It's not just looks though, the massive cylindrical grip on the 515 side makes these super easy to plug in and pull out, which can be an issue sometimes on normal cables. There's also versions that are coiled and others with right angles, both of which I had never seen before. The right angle could be a lifesaver in certain setups, and the coiled one has tons of potential uses. I'm thinking like music equipment, DJ turntables, anything that might be moving around or need a bit of slack, like something on a table with casters. While I don't personally have an immediate need for those features, I do have a very particular way that I like my cables to be, and finding these power cords in the proper length has proven pretty difficult in the past. My setup has a dress code. I like plain black rubber jackets, so everything is as uniform and hidden as possible. For the longest time, I had struggled to find short, quality power cables for my DAC and amp that weren't some crazy audiophile snake oil cable that cost like $300 and looked like an eel. Thanks to this discovery, I was able to fix that. This is a 3-foot cable, 14 gauge. It seems like most basic cables on Amazon are 18 gauge, and presumably being a hospital-grade cable, it's more robust than average. The hospital has been the source of dope tech for a while, with things like Sony PVM CRTs that are prized for their superior picture quality and robust build. While they might not be as exciting, these cables are a pretty cool find, and being that they're not that expensive, I'd definitely recommend them. Now, me being me, I kept digging on the websites where these hospital-grade products were being sold. Ever since I was a small child, I've had a desire to get my hands on stuff that's found in stores or businesses. The display they had the Bionicles in, the GameCube demo unit, stuff that's not meant for household consumers, the stuff you're not supposed to have as like a normal person with a home address, like this Japanese money tray that I have. Over the years, I've found a couple good outlets for this fascination of mine. McMaster Car is a fun website to visit, technically super impressive as well, made the rounds for that a while back. Aerating vibrators, vibrating tables, vibrating feeders, they really have it all. Fisher Scientific is another good one. I really enjoy centrifuge design. Lab fridges and freezers seem fun, not that I know what I'd even do with one. And I love this blue cabinet, but it's too expensive. But by far the best place to go is ULINE. Most businesses, warehouses, offices, what have you, are using stuff they order from ULINE, and they kind of sell everything. Boxes, packing materials, speed bumps, conveyors, toilet paper, golf balls, pocket knives, emergency showers, hydraulic floor cranes. I even got the supplies for my sticker store here, which, by the way, you should check out. I've got the Speed Limit 14 sticker in honor of the previous video. Thanks for the support on that, by the way. I think the Halo sticker is kind of relevant again in light of Campaign Evolved. I just don't know what they're doing. This is like the 5th attempt at resurrecting the franchise. Basically, every Halo release for the past 10 years has been trying to resurrect the franchise, which at this point isn't even dead, it's like fossilized. It looks rushed. I think we kind of know it's rushed, and what is this rocket launcher? Anyway, please go check out my stickers. If you order any, they'll be delivered to you in ULINE plastic sleeves. And to get back to ULINE, they sell so much stuff that I genuinely started buying furniture there last year. This is ULINE boltless shelving, one of their more popular products. You'll find it in offices and warehouses everywhere. And I highly recommend them if you need a robust shelf in your house and you're, okay with it looking like that. I actually cut the legs down on one of these and use it as a TV console because it was way cheaper and more usable than anything else I could find. ULINE is one of those things where once you know about it, you start noticing it literally everywhere. While it's certainly worth checking out, it's not always the best place to get everything because the minimum order quantities can be pretty intense. Like, I wanted to get some of the egg cartons because why not, but I definitely don't need 200 of them. One time I did in-warehouse pickup, and it was one of the coolest experiences ever. They have their own street address, the warehouse is, like, incomprehensibly large, and they even bring your stuff out on a pallet. Okay, so I got a little sidetracked, but the point is, I love this kind of industrial business-to-business product stuff that a normal consumer would generally never interact with. And after doing a little bit of digging, I found some products that intrigued me, namely medical-grade PC peripherals. For something you'd expect to be an extremely niche industry, there's a ton of brands and options here, ranging from companies I've never heard of that seem like they only make this stuff, all the way to names like Cherry, as in Cherry MX. I knew at minimum I had to pick up a keyboard and mouse just to see what it's like, but this insane amount of options was kind of overwhelming. After sitting on it though, I realized that the majority of these are actually pretty boring. And when I say that, I mean boring in the sense that it's visually obvious how they achieve their medical grade rating, and it's really not that interesting. A lot of them are just ostensibly a normal keyboard or mouse encased in silicone or with a removable silicone sheath, which is the most unimaginative and also kind of lazy way to make something waterproof and washable. Some of them are like these glass things with a capacitive layer, which is almost certainly miserable to use. The fruit roll-up ones are kind of neat, but again, just looking at it, I feel like every question is already answered. I ultimately ended up with 2 products from a company called Seal Shield, both of which I chose because it's not immediately apparent that either of these should be able to endure the various tortures that they're rated for. So first up is the Seal Shield medical grade keyboard model number SSWKSV207R4. This is a 104 key full-size wired USB keyboard, and on the surface, it just looks totally normal. Maybe a little dated and cheap, but you wouldn't assume that it's IP68 rated, or blood resistant, bleach resistant, or dishwasher safe. So clearly whatever they're doing to achieve that is under the board or inside of the board, which you'd maybe imagine would dramatically affect how it feels to use. Then the mouse. This is the Seal Shield Storm medical grade mouse, model number STM042. This is a wired USB optical mouse, and while it's a little more conspicuous than the keyboard with washable proudly emblazoned on its body, it's otherwise a pretty normal looking thing. Finally, I got this mouse pad, which, let's just get this fully out of the way now because it's a joke. I regretted each of the $6 or $7 I spent on it the second I took it out of the package. It's one of those scratchy plastic sheet style pads that I remember having as a little kid in the 2000s, but it's like a really pathetically bad version of that. It's super thin, it came to me already deformed like this, and then there's no foam pad on the bottom for anti-slip. Instead, it's basically a giant sticker, and while you can obviously wipe this down, the fact that it's literally a sticker means it's a disposable item, and also not a very good mousepad. Most mousepads are already pretty washable, and honestly, I'm not sure you even really need a mousepad in most medical offices and rooms. You could get away with just using the table, which this sticker mousepad is only marginally better than anyway. So with that thing written off in the garbage, I put the keyboard and mouse on my desk to see how they performed and if there'd be any noticeable compromises in feel due to how they were made. The keyboard feels just about like a normal membrane keyboard, if not slightly better. Super quiet sound, almost feels dampened. The only thing off about it is these stabilized keys, specifically backspace, enter, and right shift. Like, take a listen to this. It sounds like metal on metal contact. And while we're at it, take a listen to the rest of the board too. Being a Taupe Cup rubber fan, I never hated membrane keyboards in concept. It's more the lack of consistency that's common with them, as well as the need to bottom out. It still has the issues inherent to a membrane keyboard, but it's a totally acceptable typing experience, and being medical grade seems to have little to no negative impact. After using it, it just felt like a normal keyboard. If I wasn't told that it had all these crazy ratings, I would have no clue. I just think I was using a 10 to 20-year-old keyboard that came with a desktop PC. It's been a very long time since I used a full-size membrane keyboard, and to be honest, I'm kind of surprised at how decent it is. The mouse is a slightly more negative experience. The clicks are the normal style of mouse click with the pinging sound, but super dampened both in sound and feel compared to a normal mouse click. This makes the travel really short and tight and also requires a bit of force. It's to the point where I think it would genuinely get tiresome to use this for hours on end. I imagine that has something to do with creating as minimal a gap as possible for water resistance. Similarly, the scroll wheel feels normal to scroll on, but clicking with it takes a ton of force. The sensor here is optical, but it's the old school style of visible red LED, as opposed to the modern style of infrared sensor which is not visible to the eye. DPI is not adjustable, which maybe seems obvious, but it's been like a century since I've used a non-gaming mouse. Likewise, no side buttons for back and forwards, which is pretty annoying. I feel like that's a standard feature now, even on non-gaming mice, with the exception of, you know.
The magic mouse.
Seems like a small thing, but seriously, in the brief time I was using this, my thumb kept reaching for those non-existent side buttons. The cable is also really bad, super stiff, and restricts movement, but like, what do you expect? So after using these in a rather sedate fashion, which, let's be honest, is the intention here, I decided to see if I could manage to do some medical-grade gaming. As I booted up Battlefield 6 and looked down and realized that I was about to play it with a mouse that said washable on it, I finally registered just how knee-deep I was in some serious BS. But I marched forward and the challenge was successfully carried out. As I anticipated, the keyboard managed to be not much of a hindrance. Bottoming out kinda sucked, it's less the force required and more the travel distance that feels annoying and kinda sluggish. I think mechanical keyboards have been so ubiquitous for so long that people forget why they're better, and this specifically is why. There's no vagueness to the input, and you don't have to bottom out to register a keystroke. We should be thankful we live in a world where you can get a clone switch mechanical board for the same price as this membrane, like $30 to $50. With that being said though, membrane is not the end of the world. I wouldn't choose to play on this keyboard ever again, but it's really not all that bad. It just slowed me down a bit and took up a lot of desk space. The real challenge came from the mouse. As I mentioned, the DPI is not adjustable and seems to be set at 600 or 800. That's quite a bit lower than what I play at, 1600, so I wasn't too used to the slow tracking speed. I tried compensating for this by doubling my in-game sensitivity, but it made tracking feel much worse, as if the sensor couldn't handle it, so I just settled for some low sensitivity gaming. Even then, it does not track well under quick movements. It kind of jitters sometimes, I think that's called spin-out. Lift-off distance is surprisingly competent though. It was challenging to play with this mouse, but also pretty rewarding. Every kill I got with it felt extra disrespectful. I was kind of shocked by how decently I was able to play with both of these, and while I would obviously never recommend it, it just goes to show that you don't need crazy stuff to play well. An entry-level mechanical keyboard and reputable gaming mouse would be miles better than this and is likely all you really need. It was clear that there's no massively apparent compromise to usability compared to normal peripherals of this style, which is really impressive considering what they're rated for and comparing them to a lot of the competitors where feel is definitely impacted. At this point, I was genuinely beginning to question if I was even in possession of medical-grade peripherals. I took the keycaps off the keyboard and it just seemed normal under there. And so I decided it was time to actually test these claims out. So operating on the assumption that every test I conducted on these would potentially destroy them, I went in order of what I personally considered to be least to most severe. I started with cold resistant, which I tested by putting the keyboard in my freezer, which at first proved to be a little difficult, for like 12 hours. Taking the keyboard out, it was immediately noticeable that the cold had settled in. The key action was super stiff, the USB connector was even frosted over a bit, but I plugged it right in and it worked flawless without skipping a beat, even as it came to room temperature and condensate formed. Same story with the mouse. Visibly frosted over, which quickly turned to condensate, but it again worked flawlessly. Next, I wanted to test their resistance to water, both of these being IP68 rated. My first idea was to just run water on them, submerge them in water, and see if it continues to function, which I thought it should. The only part that's potentially an issue is the USB connection, which is detachable and has this silicone sheath, presumably to protect it when you wash it. I went ahead and taped that connection up to prevent it from coming in contact with water. And yeah, with water actively being poured on it, it continued to type no issues, which I don't think any normal keyboard would survive. I think it would just short from the water. I decided to up the ante by putting the drain stopper in, and it kept typing until it didn't and stopped reliably taking inputs and then decided to change languages.
It still works, I just didn't expect it to be Japanese.
Not wanting to push my luck so early into the testing, I decided to stop running an electrical current through it and simply subject both the keyboard and mouse to an hour of submersion and see if they'd work right after being plucked out of the water. Much to my surprise, both worked flawlessly, even without properly draining them. Then came the ultimate and final test, the one claim they're so proud of that it's written on both products: dishwasher safe. As I placed both peripherals on the rack, I felt like I was doing something very, very wrong, but it had to be done. If I was going to do it, it was going to be no holds barred. I put it on a normal cycle, including heat dry, with detergent, and then patiently waited. When I saw that it was done, I hesitantly opened the washer door, prepared for the worst. The mouse appeared mostly dry and unaffected, just some water spots, while the keyboard was actively very wet. I immediately plugged the keyboard in, water still seeping out of it, and it typed with literally zero issues. Amazing. And the mouse worked fine as well. I have to say I was pretty impressed, especially with the keyboard. With all the heat that comes with a normal dishwasher cycle, as well as the detergent and quite long duration of the wash, this is no small feat. Maybe a normal keyboard and mouse could survive some water, even a submersion if given time to dry out, but straight out of a full dishwasher cycle, I think that is pretty impressive, and it certainly lives up to the claim on the box. The only real thing left to do was tear both of these down and see how they managed to achieve this while maintaining the design of a traditional keyboard and mouse. I was immediately surprised to find that the shell of the mouse is held together by only one screw, and upon removing it and releasing the top shell, I found quite a bit of moisture inside, which was concerning until I realized what was going on. Tearing down a normal mouse usually reveals a PCB with all the componentry, but here, all of it is sealed up inside this black box with cutouts for the cable, the scroll wheel, and mouse 1 and 2, both of which are covered in silicone, which explains the dampened click feel. And you can see the box is sealed up with a rubber gasket. The keyboard was a much more involved process. The shell is held together by about a dozen Phillips head screws. Once inside, I found the membrane layer and this plastic backplate. The entire top half of the keyboard is totally normal stuff, just a screwed together clamshell design with keycaps attached to sliders. The bottom half of the shell is also normal, save for the addition of these drain holes. The membrane layer itself also does not appear to be any different than a normal membrane keyboard, which is why this just feels normal to use. There's nothing about this that says waterproof until you get to where the membrane layer connects to the PCB. Much like the mouse, this is another PCB encased in a box with a rubber gasket that seals the gap, and a thick layer of putty around where the USB cable connects. The strategy on both of these is to actually waterproof as little as possible. They're not trying to seal up the shell at all, it's just the core electric componentry that is IP rated. In fact, water is kind of getting all up and inside this thing in every nook and cranny, which in some ways is not ideal. I left both of these overnight after the dishwasher, and there's a lot of water that would take a long time to dry had I not torn them apart. This approach is not what I expected, but seems quite obvious in retrospect. Waterproofing a product becomes more difficult and expensive the larger and more intricate it is. These are like $30 products, and there's also no reason to be waterproofing things that aren't affected by water. I recently found myself in a dentist office, and while I was having dentist things done to me, I realized, oh shit, this is the perfect opportunity to look at their PC and see what medical grade keyboard and mouse they're using. After making the strangest request this dentist had ever heard and awkwardly shuffling my way out of the dental chair, I walked over and was stunned at what I saw. This is just a totally normal wireless keyboard from Office Max, with some saran wrap hastily put over it and presumably replaced with hopefully some regularity. And the mouse? Just a plain wireless mouse totally raw. I guess that works, it should do the job, but I thought it was pretty funny that back home, I had equipment that was better for the job than they did. Unlike the hospital-grade cables, I can't think of much use for these in the home, but given how reasonably priced they are, I think every dentist or medical office should be using them. As a kid, I remember hearing a study stating that keyboards can be dirtier than a toilet, and you don't need to do a swab test to notice that keyboards and mice get gross, really gross, especially in shared public environments. There is a lot of genuine use to peripherals that can be quickly and thoroughly sanitized, and not just in medical offices. Warehouses, places that process food or medical products, and places like hotels or libraries with public computers. As someone with a bit of a cleanliness addiction, I do wish more things could just be put in the dishwasher. It would make life a lot easier.